637, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk, 99.7 WTN. Appreciate you listening along with Ken Weaver, Johnny B, Dan Mandis here indeed. I want to welcome on into the program Matthew Hurtt, our grassroots political analyst. Always great to have you on, Matthew. So let's talk about the debate first of all. There's a battle over open mics. There's a battle over whether or not they'll be able to take notes and whether or not everybody is allowed to sit down. Now, I think it's interesting that the main point of contention seems to be this situation regarding open mics. And of course, ABC, I laid out in the previous segment where the former president is angry with ABC because of the way that Tom Cotton was treated by ABC News anchor Jonathan Karl. I don't know. I mean, that's nothing new. I mean, I'm just a little surprised that Trump is talking about maybe not doing this debate because everybody understands that Kamala Harris needs to be given the chance to offer up that word salad.
Yeah, this is something that the American people deserve to see. Now, whether or not a president should have the skill to debate, this is something that we sort of talk about cycle to cycle. But you're absolutely right. You mentioned a couple of these elements in your last segment where what we know Kamala Harris wants to do is exactly the kind of presentation she makes at her rallies and political events. She wants to be snarky. She wants to try to irk Donald Trump. And what we saw in the debate back at the beginning of the summer was a Donald Trump who was on message, a Donald Trump who, with the help of the microphone, the muted microphone situation, actually came out looking really good. And Kamala Harris saw that. She saw what happened to Joe Biden, and she doesn't want that to happen to her. Yep. And so this is the threat as they negotiate these debate specifics ahead of what I hope is a debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
So I'm trying to figure out, because now I've seen two different stories, and maybe you can clarify for me about the open mics. So Harris is requesting that ABC and other networks seeking to host a potential debate keep microphones on. So she wants the microphones on. I've seen other stories where she wants it off. But so just to clarify, Kamala Harris wants the microphones on. Is that correct?
That is what it appears to me, and this could cut either way, right? It could show Donald Trump attempting to interrupt her, but it's also the same kind of elements that she would employ, where she could interrupt him and score points with her, as you said, let me finish, or I'm speaking, or any of those kinds of things. And this is sort of that psychological game. How will it appear on national television, either for Donald Trump to constantly interrupt a woman, potentially, or for her to say, I'm speaking, or you're mansplaining this to me. And so it cuts both ways how this could turn out if the mics are not muted.
Well, and in a way, Donald Trump is in a no-win situation, because even if she interrupts him and then he tries to engage, she'll pull that I'm speaking nonsense. And we all know what the media will certainly do. The media will always side with Kamala Harris because that's what the media does.
Absolutely. And so it is sort of a no-win situation. This would take some discipline on Donald Trump's part so that he doesn't interrupt her, but that doesn't seem to counteract what happens if she interrupts him or she replies with one of these snarky responses, again, that we've seen at the rallies, that tone that she takes in conversation.
Let me ask you I don't know if you listened to the previous segment, but you've probably heard the audio of Tom Cotton and Jonathan Karl going back and forth. But there wasn't anything within that interview that is any different from what ABC or NBC or CBS or any of these folks have done to defend Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. I mean, that, at least to me, seemed pretty standard fare. None of that was really surprising to me. They've been defending Kamala Harris for how long now? So what was that back and forth between Tom Cotton and Jonathan Karl? Was that worse than it usually is in your estimation?
Legacy media has always been on offense for the Democrats and defending their positions and defending what it is that they would say. This is just another element, the Cotton interaction with Jonathan Karl, and for media to say, oh, this isn't how we're going to do it, or to pretend to be offended or somehow nonplussed or put off by how aggressive Tom Cotton is. Tom Cotton is really good on television. He goes on offense. He makes very strong points, and this is on par with what we've seen, but it is only going to continue for Donald Trump and for his surrogates, people like Tom Cotton, who go on and speak on behalf of the campaign. And this is something that the American people have to be ready for, and particularly for Donald Trump supporters to take note of this, but then to go out and do what has to be done to get the message out there.
Do you think I'm gonna get into Tulsi Gabbard real quick? I mean, she came out, she supported now former President Trump, and she, of course, is a Democrat. I kind of called it yesterday when you had RFK Jr. talking about how more Democrats were going to come into the fold for Donald Trump. And not really surprising, Matthew Hurtt is joining us on the Newsmaker hotline. This was Tulsi Gabbard last night or yesterday as she was endorsing former President Donald Trump. Johnny needs some audio.
Have been before. This is one of the main reasons why I'm committed to doing all that I can to send President Trump back to the White House, where he can once again serve us as our commander-in-chief. Because I am confident that his first task will be to do the work to walk us back from the brink of war. We cannot be prosperous unless we are at peace.
And that is Tulsi Gabbard, one of many messages from yesterday talking about Donald Trump. Matthew, what do you think? Is this going to move the needle even more for Donald Trump after RFK yesterday?
Well, what we've seen on the side of Kamala Harris are Republicans who've come out in support of her. What we saw with Donald Trump is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and now Tulsi Gabbard. There's a lot I could say about Tulsi. She's got a long history of political activism that doesn't play inside the Democratic Party. But this is one element of a narrative. Again, all of these instances, if a campaign is on message, if you're talking about national security or you're talking about building a bipartisan coalition, it isn't one story. It isn't just the RFK Jr. endorsement, but it is who else can come out in favor. And so this is the second opportunity for somebody who has a long history in the Democratic Party to come out in favor of Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump can get a few more of these key endorsements, it would be very important in saying, Donald Trump has broad appeal for a number of issues. I was speaking to an activist yesterday who said, what would be great is if for the remainder of the campaign, Donald Trump came out with an endorsement like this or an announcement of somebody he would appoint to his cabinet to show the bipartisan appeal. Tulsi Gabbard as the Secretary of the VA would be an excellent addition. She served on the front lines in the global war on terror, and she knows the needs and concerns of veterans. And for Donald Trump to not only use that endorsement, but perhaps elevate someone like Tulsi into a cabinet position would give those moderates, give independents, and even some Democrats a permission slip to go and vote for Donald Trump in this election. So it's a very important singular endorsement, but it drives a narrative that there is bipartisan appeal for this candidate for Donald Trump.
All right, so real quickly, it's been a few days since you and I spoke. RFK Jr. last week coming out endorsing Donald Trump, talking about joining his campaign. He's making the campaign, he's making all the stops on some of the local media shows, and also had a great interview with Tucker Carlson last night. But, RFK Jr., he's got the issues with his voice, but I think his message is crystal clear, and that is that the Democrats had it out for him. They did everything they could, utilizing law form and more to keep him out of the race. And Donald Trump opened up the tent and welcomed him right on in. And are you seeing anything in your world about any specific polling to the situation now? We know that he was doing 3 to 5% in the battleground states.
It'll take a few days for this announcement to make it into the top lines into state level and national polls. But it is one of those things that around the margins in key states where it matters, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and others, where an endorsement like this could peel off a pocket of 5,000 or 10,000 voters, those individuals who had indicated they would support RFK in a general election matchup, Donald Trump could win some of those. Others, they could say, I was in for RFK, but I'm not in for anything else, and I will vote my conscience, or perhaps I'll even sit it out. So what we see sometimes are voters who they could go one of two ways, or they could just leave the top of the ballot blank. And so you have that, but you also have the enthusiasm element of this, where people who were supporting RFK or were on the fence may become more enthusiastic with this announcement.
All right, we only have like a minute left, but Mark Zuckerberg, I covered this extensively in the 5 o'clock hour. Mark Zuckerberg has come out with a letter where he admits censoring for Joe Biden in this bombshell letter, and says the White House pressured him to do so. And so they basically, as we all know, as conservatives, they spiked any stories or suppressed any stories that had to do with, vaccination skepticism, or calling out lockdowns that would be have really bad negative side effects as well. Of course, we know that they also suppressed the laptop from hell. He has admitted now, Mark Zuckerberg has admitted to doing both of those things and really throwing the Biden White House under the bus. Do you think this is going to have any kind of an impact?
We've seen this in the Twitter files. The American people know that the Biden administration put pressure on social media operations to stifle this. This further confirms for more people. It will make the headlines. This is another in a series of headlines. Again, a singular issue, a single poll doesn't mean much, but a narrative is something that then sticks with the American people. And so if you're a Facebook user, you use social media, and you had some concerns or you weren't paying attention, now it's another element that proves to you that this is what the federal government did. They used the power. They may not actually censor the speech, but imagine if you're a company, imagine if you're a social media company or even a small business, and a federal regulator comes to you and says, it'd be nice if you didn't do that.
Right.
A lot of people, that ends up stifling a certain activity, and in this instance, it stifles speech. Meta and Facebook used these warnings to make decisions, even though there wasn't a specific regulation. And the American people are tuned in and clued into this, and they will make a decision based on this, knowing that the federal government under the Biden-Harris administration compelled or strongly encouraged these companies to peel back or to pull back on a lot of this quote-unquote misinformation. So this is another element of the story, another element of the narrative that drives the point home that Biden-Harris used the federal government to bully private businesses.
I think it'd be kind of funny if if Donald Trump brought in Mark Zuckerberg as like censorship czar. You know what I mean? Just watching all the social media companies and making sure that they're not being censored by anybody. And that would be, I know this is not going to happen, but I think that would be great if Trump sort of jumped on this and brought more attention to this, because I think this is even though, again, and I said it in the 5, we've all known that this has been going on for a long time. I thought it was interesting that Zuckerberg came out with this letter to the Senate now. I thought it was interesting. I'm not exactly sure why now he did this, but it is certainly advantageous for conservatives and for Donald Trump, because we've been screaming about this for a long time. And Matthew, as you know, we were called conspiracy theorists.